What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nati with another video for the channel. Welcome back to DMVSportsZone. And today I got Lake Lewis on a very, very special interview today. We'll be talking a little bit about his career path and also, of course, the Washington football team and some other teams also in the area as well. And Lake, before we get into the Washington football team, I was wondering if you could actually introduce yourself to the great people out there who might not already know you and sort of what your career path has looked like up until this point.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on, Lake Lewis. I've been around for a little bit. I date you quite a bit, but I am right now. A beat reporter covering the Washington football team, going into my 10th season. In the past, I've covered the Washington Wizards, the New York Giants, Baltimore Ravens, Orlando Magic. So I've been around, but I'm originally from this area, from the, as you young folks say, the DMV. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that saying, but yeah, from Northeast Washington, D.C. and, pretty much grew up though in Montgomery County in Silver Spring. So yeah, I'm a native to the area, and to be able to be back here covering, pretty much the number one team in the market, the Washington football team, it's a blessing, it's not, and I've worked for this, I've worked my tail off to be in this position, but nevertheless, still grateful, to be able to cover a team that as a kid I used to root for. So, it's special to me.
I mean, we know you work hard every single day, but could we just take a second to see the background and to acknowledge it? I mean, that's pretty spectacular that you have that going on right now during the interview. Didn't mention it off camera, but it's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, when I when I go on TV here locally, originally because of Zoom, with COVID, everyone had to go to Zoom. So, originally it was just my house background, and everyone was like, why don't you just start putting, your, just going up with your backdrop for your podcast that you do. And so this is my after practice podcast backdrop, and it's gotten a lot of love. So I definitely appreciate you acknowledging that as well.
No problem. But yeah, one more question before we get into the football team here. But as I talked a little bit with you off camera, I know you graduated from Georgetown University. I am a big Hoyas fan, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Georgetown University Big East Championship run that they had this past season. Obviously, it was cut short in the NCAA tournament after one game. It was not an entertaining game to watch, but I was wondering what your thoughts on the run that Georgetown has had, after a series of years where they weren't really winning much, and the future of the program under Coach Patrick Ewing.
Yes, I'm still a Hoya as well, but I was super impressed with what they did in that Big East run. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Only thing I'm concerned about is that they're having an epic rate of players transferring out of the program. And I don't want to speculate and say why they're leaving, but I know Patrick Ewing's trying to bring a culture back to the hilltop where you're going to play hard, you're going to hustle, you're going to work your tail off, and basically do what they did to win the Big East tournament. So they've got a nice recruiting class coming in. I'm really excited about that class. It's they're going to have to play them early now. A lot of these guys coming in, Ryan Mutombo, Dikembe Mutombo's son, he's a nice young big. They're going to have to play him early because, their starting center from last year, who really was starting to come on, transferred around the corner to Maryland. That was kind of shocking to me because normally, we don't do things with Maryland, period. So, they're going to have to play these guys young, but I still tell everyone who says, can Patrick Ewing do this? Well, he's already won a Big East tournament. I mean, seriously, he did it with a team that no one expected to win, period. So you have to give him more time to get more of his type of players in. And, he inherited some players that all left. So now the last 2 years, these are his guys. So we'll have to see how they produce. But normally you don't see those results until year 2 or 3 anyway. So next year, might be the year. This year, they should still be above water. But next year, I think, is the year where we're going to have to see where Georgetown basketball truly is.
And now with the team that plays its home games in Landover, Maryland, at least temporarily, we'll see for how long that lasts. But what do you make of the current trademark battle the team finds itself in?
Mhm.
over its current Washington football team moniker. And do you think it will hinder the organization at all in securing what they believe will be sort of a permanent name come the 2022 season?
No, I don't think so. I mean, money talks at the end of the day. And, people who went out and purchased names, just hoping that this team may be interested in one of those names. That's pretty much what you find in anything. This isn't anything new in any business. There are a lot of people out there that, may see a cupcake ad on TV and think that cupcake's about to blow up, and then they go and purchase the name. Trust me, I know, because my sports journey name was very similar in that kind of situation. So I just think at the end of the day, they're trying to find their identity, and more importantly, the identity on the field is what all the fans truly care about. I said this last year. They could name themselves the Washington. I don't know, the Washington no goods, you know. And if they win a Super Bowl, people are going to call them that forever, and they'll come up with a nice catchy logo to go with that name. So at the end of the day, what they're doing, which is most important, is they're developing their identity on the field with some young talent. They should be a much improved football team this year too, so they have a chance to defend their divisional crown, which no team has done, by the way, in the past 16 seasons. So this will be something that'll be, heavily watched. But as far as the name, I've always felt like the name was going to be the Warriors. I still feel that way. I say that because you're really, trademarking and patenting and putting out that W everywhere. It's on the building when we're out here in Ashburn. I live out here, so it's on the building. It's on every seat in the stadium. You don't go out and do all that work to take something down in less than a year. It just doesn't make sense to me. So if you go with the name Warriors, that W stays, and that W may now go on your helmet, and you go with the name Warriors. So it just, again, that's just my own take on this, and I'm sticking to it until proven otherwise. But yeah. I think it's going to be the Warriors.
Do you hold any weight for, especially like as an NFL team, having sort of a unique name? Because I know a lot of fans out there, including myself, I mean, when we think of the Warriors, we think the Golden State Warriors, right? And we'll always pretty much, this football team will always pretty much be living in the Golden State Warriors shadow for as long as they don't win any Super Bowls, right? So
I wouldn't say that. I say that because the Warriors have been around since the 50s. But most people don't know that because the Warriors haven't been any good. I mean, they had a run, when I was younger, when they had Run TMC, Chris Mullin, Mitch Richmond, Tim Hardaway, but they never won a championship. They were a good team, but they weren't a championship team. So they didn't get that until, Steph Curry came around, and Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant got in there and stole one. I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, that's the last decade of success. So Washington football team, though, has been around since 1932. So I think, I wouldn't say they're going to live in anyone's shadow. They're just going to share a name. The good thing about that, if they do go with that name, is that at least that name has some cachet to it now because of the Golden State Warriors. So, but people have to remember the Golden State Warriors logo used to be Native American too. And they switched it to the bridge, that represents, Oakland and San Francisco. So I think as long as Washington can come up with something that represents the nation's capital, I've seen a lot of the W's where the inside of the W is like the Capitol building or something like that.
It's cool.
Or a monument, arching up. As long as you can incorporate that in there, the most important thing is it gets away from any kind of Native American imagery. And that's the most important thing at this point right now.
And drifting a little bit away from the name for the Washington football team, I wanted to get your thoughts on Washington's offseason moves as overall. And also, what moves do you think will turn out to be the best ones and the worst ones by the end of the 2021 season?
I mean, I like all the moves they've made. We tend to be optimistic at this time if you cover this team, and sometimes it was, I don't want to say fake optimism, but you really had to find some silver linings in something. But this year it's totally different. I mean, the players that they brought in, free agency, are players that they need. You know, they needed another quarterback. They needed a veteran presence. They got that in Ryan Fitzpatrick. They needed a corner, you know, to replace Terrence Darby. I mean, not Terrence Darby. I mean, that's a name from the past. You need to look that up when the show's over. Okay, he's a musician, but no, you know, when Ronald Darby, you know, and I think they upgraded over Ronald Darby, you know, and bringing in Will Jackson. I mean, he's a Pro Bowl guy and lockdown corner, you know, physical corner. So now that only enhances an already good defense. And then you think on top of that, you draft Jamin Davis, you know, to fill the middle of the field. The guy looked absolutely ridiculously athletic out there during mini camp. So he can run sideline to sideline. He's got speed. So all those holes that they needed, they filled either via free agency or the draft. You know, De'Ami Brown, you know, I really like what he's possibly going to be able to do for them on offense at the wide receiver spot. So, you know, these are moves that were made that I think solidified this team. And I don't mean as a Super Bowl threat, but it solidified this team as one of the up and coming young teams in the NFL that last year had a little bit of success. Yes, the record wasn't a winning record, but anytime you get a chance to compete in the playoffs, and this team didn't just get a chance to compete in the playoffs, they got a chance to compete against the GOAT. You know, they got a chance to compete against the team that ultimately won the Super Bowl. So they had a different path, and they had a chance to measure themselves up close and personal against a Super Bowl winning team. And, you know, from what my eyes saw being in that stadium that night, it was cold, I will say that. But being in that stadium, I saw a young team that competed and actually competed better against the Buccaneers than the other teams that the Buccaneers went through to get to the Super Bowl, including the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl against them. So I think this is just a young upstart team. They're ascending, their trajectory is upward, and I'm expecting big things from all the acquisitions they've made this offseason.
Yeah, and your comments there, perfect segue for my next question, because of course, in that Buccaneers game in the playoffs, Heinicke, I mean, he had a better performance than Aaron Rodgers against that Bucs defense, than Patrick Mahomes against that Bucs defense, and I believe Drew Brees against that Bucs defense. I mean, what are your thoughts on the quarterback room right now? And do you think the talk from Ron Rivera about a quarterback competition in training camp is legitimate, or do you just think he's trying to right the wrong of going into the 2020 season with Haskins as the undisputed starter and no real competition for him at that point? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit of both. And Ron told us actually after one of the minicamp practices in our press conference with him, he told us that, you know, Fitzpatrick was their guy, you know, but he wants to see how Taylor can push him, you know, how Heinicke can push him. Listen, I was out there. I looked at every pass, every throw, and I've said it, and I'm not going to take it back. This is not a knock on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, he's a veteran. He's proven himself. But my eyes saw Taylor looked better to me. and he just looked like he was more comfortable, which he should be. Let's face it. Fitzpatrick is just coming here. Heinicke's been in this offense. So, you know, you really can't make too much out of it because it was just, you know, 3 days of mini camp. They didn't have their pads on. It's tailor-made for the offense to be able to move on the defense because the defense can't hit anyone. But I just think the throws that I saw that were made, you know, deep ball throws too, Heinicke just, you know, he looked better. He did. Is that saying that Fitzpatrick's going to look like this come preseason training camp? You know, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I hope there is a legitimate quarterback competition because you need the best guy to win that job. Last thing this team needs is any kind of controversy or any kind of, you know, divided locker room. And I can tell you right now, with your eyes, the last optics that we saw, you know, visuals that we saw with Heinicke was in that playoff game, diving to the end zone, having his teammates run and support him, pick him up. You know, he gets hurt, he comes back, he showed everything you want to see a quarterback do in one game. You know, toughness, leadership, ability. He showed all of those things. So if he goes out and plays well in training camp and in the preseason especially, listen, it's not just going to be grumblings. It's going to be guys like myself reporting that is the right player under center. So, but if let's not forget about Kyle Allen as well, because he has a shot. If he goes out and plays well too, we have to equally, talk about him as well. So just let the best guy be under center for week one. When they play the Los Angeles Chargers here to start the season, whoever's under center is the guy that should have earned it and won the locker room as well.
And what better test is this upcoming training camp period when you're going against one of the best defenses in the league, right? So I think you guys will be able to see who for sure is the better quarterback out of the bunch. But on the quarterback topic and Fitzpatrick specifically, Coach Rivera also mentioned that, who knows, Ryan Fitzpatrick might be a quarterback here in DC beyond this year, right? Because I think all of us going into the offseason thought it was a foregone conclusion. Fitzpatrick was only here for 1 year. He's a 1-year rental. He's getting up there in age. You can't be the future of this franchise. You can't be here beyond this year. Probably get one in the drafts, or maybe go after a guy like Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers in the coming months and years. So do you think that's legitimate as well, that discussion there, that Ryan Fitzpatrick could be here beyond the 2021 season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to really think about where they think they're going to be this year. If this team makes the playoffs, they're not going to be having one of the top picks to, address that position. Do you really want to draft someone at 28, 29 and start them right away? That's not really the order that goes. Normally those guys that start are, they're guys that come in and they're maybe top 10, maybe a Justin Fields at 12 will have a shot at some point. But the guys who go after, 15, they're guys that either the season's going bad the following year and they get their shot, they're pushed in there, or there's an injury, they're pushed in there. So I think this team feels like they're going to be a playoff team again. And if that's the case, maybe it's Ryan Fitzpatrick that takes them there. The only thing going against Ryan Fitzpatrick is his age. That's it. But if he has a stellar season this year, there's going to be a couple factors that will lead, to him having a stellar season. One's going to be the defense played well. That's the most important thing. And I keep telling people this defense is so good. I mean, they're young. They have a chance to be great. This is the team's bread and butter. It's not quarterback. It's not, Terry McLaurin at wide receiver and, Antonio Gibson at running back. No offense to those guys, because they're really good young players, and McLaurin should be a Pro Bowler real soon, if not this year. But it's the defense that's going to take this team wherever they need to go. And that's the group that you don't want to break up. So, if I have to sign another lineman, obviously Jonathan Allen's probably going to get his money before the season starts, but then you have to look at Daron Payne up next. Fortunately, Matt Ioannidis is under contract, but then you have a guy like Tim Settle. What do you want to do with him? So with all that said, that's just for now, for the next 2 years. Then we already know what's happening after that. You've got to pay. They're going to have to bring a Brinks truck up to the facility to pay Chase Young and Montez.
30 million at that point. I mean, Joey Bosa got 26 million, I believe, per season.
Yeah. They're going to have to pay ridiculous money to these guys. And everyone's, has this doomsday approach now, like, oh, they're not going to be able to keep these guys. That's not necessarily true. And I say this with all due respect to those guys. I know a lot of those guys, but name one Pro Bowler outside of Chase. I'll wait. The reason why I say that is because you can afford guys that haven't done that. And again, I'm not saying that they're not good players. They really are very good players, and they probably should. Yeah, and they probably can get a Pro Bowl or two under their belt before it's all said and done. But as of now, they haven't done that. So no, the team's not paying them Pro Bowl money. I mean, that's not, Jonathan Allen's not saying I need to be one of the top 2 or 3 defensive linemen in football. His credentials don't warrant that right now. They warrant good money, but not ridiculous money that's going to destroy your salary cap. So I think fans need to be, mindful of that. They have a chance to re-sign most of these players that they have.
But was Leonard Williams a Pro Bowler this year? Up there in New York, because you got
mistaken. Yeah, no, he wasn't. But also, there's a big difference too. Look at where Leonard Williams was drafted. and look at where Jonathan Allen was drafted. All those things go into consideration when you're breaking down a contract for someone. Has Jonathan Allen been one of the better defensive linemen in football over his 3 years? Of course he has. I mean, if you look at all the numbers and really truly break them down, and not just look at sacks. That's where everyone goes first. Well, he didn't have a lot of sacks. No, he has a lot of hurries. A lot of plays are stopped because of Jonathan Allen. And you look at where he was when the play was stopped. Those are the things that I don't think a lot of fans really understand that we look at on film. He's everywhere all the time. So he's been damn near dominant, without the sacks. So they're going to have to pay him. I don't think anyone's, upset that they're going to have to pay him. These are the problems that you want with good football teams. You just don't want to pay guys that are 35, 34, and in their best days were on another team and they come here and play with masks under their helmets. We don't need that anymore. So I like what's going on here. But yeah, they're going to sign a lot of these guys. I don't think fans need to worry about that.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier in your comments about Terry McLaurin and potentially having that Pro Bowl season this year. I mean, just in general, when it comes to stats and just overall production, how big of a season do you think our guy Terry McLaurin will have this year, with Fitzpatrick tending to pepper his number one receiving targets year in and year out? And then also with Terry McLaurin, what do you envision the wide receiver group looking like after final roster cuts?
Man, this is going to be a really nice group this year. I think a lot of people should be excited. The wide receiver position on potential alone has a chance to be one of their top 3-4 units. And that has not been the case over the past few seasons. It's been pretty much Terry McLaurin and everyone else. Let's call it like it is. Cam Sims, emerged a little bit last year. He still hasn't had that, quote unquote breakout season. And I don't know if he ever will. I mean, you got to keep in mind, this is like 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. But with that being said, you bring in a Curtis Samuels, a fast player that you can move all over the field, can play multiple positions. That's only going to enhance your offense. And then on top of that, you draft a guy like Brown from North Carolina who's a deep ball threat. And if you weren't sure of that, he was showing that in minicamp. He was going up and down the field against some pretty good corners. So that's a plus for them. Those are going to be their top 3 receivers, in my opinion. And then, of course, you bring in Humphreys, who's a pro. He's a veteran. I know he has some history with concussions, but if he can stay healthy, that's going to really help solidify that slot position for this team. So much so that some young guys like a Steven Sims Jr. may not make this roster, and that's not a knock on him, because just 2 seasons ago, we were like, they found their slot guy for the future, make you maybe forget Jamison Crowder. Well, now he's on the outside looking in. I can assure you that. I know that for sure. They're going to want to try to find a way to keep the guy because he's a talent, but the numbers may not add up. And this is what good football teams go through every year. You have to make the hard cuts. You have to make the hard decisions where guys who may be, fan favorites or whatever just don't make the team because of sheer talent at that position. I think the wide receiver spot's going to have some major, for this market, cuts, not major around the NFL, but where does Kelvin Harmon fit in? Just 2 seasons ago, before he hurt his knee, we thought McLaurin and Harmon were going to be their 2 outside receivers, period, going forward. He might not make the roster. So it's a lot of AGG, it's a lot of guys that are going to have to really put the work in to be on this 53-man roster.
Do you think when it comes down to it, if AGG and Kevin Harmon are on the roster bubble, which is likely where they're going to end up, right, for the wide receiver room, do you think that Ron Rivera will likely give AGG the edge because of the fact that he drafted him and Kevin Harmon is part of the old regime? Do you think they're
no,
do you think he puts that much weight to? Okay.
No, and I say that because people don't realize Ron Rivera's under a lot of pressure to win. I mean, he's not just the guy that had to come here and be the face, which was unfortunate, that was thrust onto him. He handled it super well, about as well as you possibly could, and handled it under his own personal circumstances, with cancer. So, you think of all those things that were put on his plate when all he was really asked to come to do was coach. Well, now he's getting a chance to coach. And, when you have success, you have to follow it up with more success. That's just the way it goes in this business. It's a what have you done for me lately type of business. So he's not in a position to play favorites. He just can't. I mean, when you let a guy like Morgan Moses go, I'm really good friends with Morgan, and I know the scoop about the whole thing. Bottom line, they wanted to go younger. That's just maybe the way they went about it. And I don't know how it was. I'll leave that alone. I know some things, but the point is, they made the decision that they wanted to go younger, which I'm not upset with, because that means that you feel like you have some young guys that are capable of holding that fort. That's what you want, because when you go younger, guess what? You also you go cheaper, which means there's more money spread around for other players that you have to sign.
So in terms of the go younger thing, so I know right after the cut, there was also some talk, at least on social media, about eventually there might be something behind closed doors that we don't know about between Morgan Moses and the team. Has that just not been the case from your discussions with Morgan?
That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all. I can assure you that. I know about the phone call and everything, the conversation that was had between him and Rivera. And listen, this is a cutthroat business at the end of the day. Coaches they're trying to win. And, I've heard worse stories, trust me. But I was surprised because it was Morgan. And Morgan is, to me, just seemed like the type of player that, Ron Rivera would like, here. Hard worker, didn't miss games, would get hurt in a game and go out and come right back in the next play. I mean, that's what it was, blueprint. But at the end of the day, Morgan is getting older, and he demands a lot of money, not like verbally. I just mean his play and his years of tenure in the league will demand a lot of money. And this team feels like, they've got to spread this money around, especially to, like we talked about earlier, those defensive players. You do have to ask yourself, do you want to pay a Morgan Moses, 12, 13, $14 million a year, if not more? Or do you want to maybe cut that in half and give 7 to 2 different players? So that's pretty much what this stuff comes down to at the end of the day. It's numbers. And, Brandon Sheriff is going to be the guy that's going to come up. Do you pay him that King's ransom to be, the top paid right guard in football? Or do you spread it out and maybe get now 2 for 1 at that same position? Those are conversations that are going to be had. But in fairness to that comment, let me say this to all the fans out there, watching or listening who are supporters of this team. Again, when was the last time this team had a first team All-Pro?
Thank you.
The big difference, So if you're going to pay money to someone, it's those guys. It's the elite. Again, name anybody else on this roster that's done that. Name anybody else on this roster that has more than 2 Pro Bowls. Again, those are the things that you have to keep in mind.
No, I speak about it all the time on this channel. A lot of people, I always get a lot of pushback to that. But I mean, like you said, if you're going to pay guys, might as well pay a guy who's been a Pro Bowler here for consecutive years, who's got an All-Pro, first time in a long time for this franchise. So I definitely agree with you there. And you talked a little bit about Jamin Davis earlier in the interview, but I was wondering here if you could talk a little bit more about him and potentially becoming Washington's 2nd consecutive defensive rookie of the year by the time the 2021 NFL season wraps up, and also your thoughts on the linebacker room and who you think the starting linebackers will be come week 1.
Yeah, I mean, he's a talent for sure. Once he gets even more seasoning and coaching, and he's just going to be a terror. I think he's got the demeanor for it. He's a nice kid, just bright, but very low key, and I like that. I like a guy that He just wants to play football. He told us that. I'm not making this up. He said, I just want to play ball. Those are his exact words, and that's what you want. And he knows what he can possibly be. He knows what's in front of him, as far as that front four, and he knows what's to the left and to the right of him coming around edges. He gets it. Trust me. So he knows that he doesn't want to be the weak link to this defense. He doesn't want to be the guy that's like, you're not doing your job. And I think that's special. That's a special trait in players. So, right now, I tweeted this out like a week and a half ago that the Vegas odds have him as the defensive rookie of the year, 4-1, and that's not a shock. A lot of people don't know about him. Like, oh man, he played at Kentucky. Well, Kentucky's not a bad football program now. They've come up big. They just happen to play in the SEC, where obviously all the love goes to Bama and LSU and Georgia. But he more than all, held his own against them when they played those teams. He stood out, on the field. So again, I think that he has a chance to be really special, and I think he'll have a really special rookie campaign. And again, let's just say he goes out and has a rookie of the year campaign, and it is 2 in a row. That's another name you're going to have to remember you're going to have to pay. So, what Chase Young did was more than win defensive rookie of the year. When you do that, that's a nationwide honor. That is signaling to everyone else around the league that you're special, that you are that guy, you're that dude. And this team hasn't had that kind of face to market in a long time. The last face that I can honestly say was a national face to market was RG3. Yeah. And you got to go back to 2012 for that. So again, these aren't things that happen every year. So stop, fans, please stop talking about, can we afford this guy, afford that guy? We only have 3 or 4 guys that you really need to break the bank for. And those are, the Chase Youngs and Brandon Scherfs of the world. But fortunately, you don't have to worry about Chase for 3 more seasons. Realistically, they're gonna redo his contract, trust me, before that. But you don't have to stress over that for right now.
Yeah, and do you think it'll be Cole Holcomb and John Bostic alongside Jamin Davis? Or Absolutely. Do you think maybe Khaleke Hudson could be a starter a couple of weeks into the season?
I think Khaleke is going to definitely get a lot of time. I do. I think he's going to hit the field quite a bit. He's a talent, but Bostic is fast. He can move. His strength just isn't covering guys.
Yeah.
So that's going to be remain to be seen how they do that. But one thing people need to realize about Jamin Davis, even though he's going to be in the middle, is that he actually was a pretty good guy in coverage. He had a couple interceptions for Kentucky. Like I said, he's fluid, he can move. So he's the guy that's probably going to end up being at times covering tight ends, on obvious 3rd down passing situations. He's a 3-down linebacker. He's not a guy that's just going to come in and hit you and then go off the field for 3rd down. He's going to be on the field the whole time. So this is what you want. So I think that linebacker room is actually going to be pretty decent. And you have to also think too that your edge rushers can drop back too, so they've got diversity on that defense, in that linebacker room as well. They've got guys that can drop back in coverage, also put their hand in the dirt too. So that's what you want. You just want that kind of athleticism. And Cole Holcomb made a couple nice plays during minicamp. Had a one-handed almost interception where he knocked the ball down where, my God, the guy just looked like somebody threw him up in the air. He was up there. I thought he was going to get hurt the way he came down. He was so far up in the air, came down on his shoulder, but everyone was just so hyped with the play he made. He bounced right back up, which was nice to see. But yeah, I think having Jamin Davis in the middle to go along with what they now have in the secondary, and then obviously what's in front of them, this defense has a chance to really be good, really, really good.
And I usually like to save this question for the last question in my live streams, weekly live streams that I have here on the channel, and also for the interviews. And it's a big one, but I'm going to ask you this one here as well. What are your thoughts on the future of this Washington football franchise? And do you think Coach Rivera is building a winner to the point where this team might win a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, that's a fair question. I don't think that's a question. If you had asked me a couple of years back, I probably would have liked it. but no, I absolutely feel like they're they're on the way up. Are they a Super Bowl team right now? No, they're not. I mean, they're, things can happen. Don't get me wrong. They're not going into the season thinking we're not good. We're not going to win a Super Bowl. Everyone feels that way. Even, heck, the worst team in the league is going to feel like that. But realistically, they're a team that knows that that's their aspiration and that's their goal. And I think that they need to take that another step. The first step is win this division again. You'll be the first team to do it in 16 seasons. Win it with a winning record. That's another step that would show that they're improving. And then also, make some noise once you get in. If you can get in the playoffs and win one game, that's a sign of improvement. Maybe you still two and you get to, conference, finals and NFC championship. But I think the first goal is to win the division. And I'm telling you, if they can do that, that's a major sign of improvement. Especially if they do that with a winning record. So the answer to your question is yes. I do think that they're capable of making some noise this year. Not a Super Bowl, but maybe knock somebody out who thinks that they should be in there. And then more importantly, I do think Ron Rivera is building something here. There's something different smell in the air when I'm out on that practice field for sure.
It's a quote right there. So thank you so much, Lake Lewis, for joining this Washington football team interview. And so we had Washington football team NFL insider and owner of the sportsjourney.com here for an interview. And I was wondering, Lake Lewis, if you wanted to plug anything, maybe that platform, sportsjourney.com, before we find ourselves out this interview.
Yeah, we've got some nice things. I podcast is back doing okay, and be working with I can't say I got to sign the contract, but you'll hear about this. What's today? Tuesday. You'll hear about this on Thursday's podcast. Who will be presenting the show, but it's a big name. So I'm happy about it. And then of course, just not just myself, but some of my writers and reporters, they do a really good job on the side covering Capitals, Wizards, Nats, so just go to Sports Journey. You see a lot of different things there. We've got a NHRA, drag racing, stock car stuff. We have it all on there. So whatever your cup of tea is, hopefully we cover it. If we're not right now, we will be. So yeah, but I definitely appreciate you having me on. And I do want to tell you, especially as a young person in this business, it's a battle of attrition, so don't ever get too high. Don't get too low. Just keep pushing forward, and your time will come for sure.
Appreciate that. And speaking of the Nats, go Nats, right? I mean, you talked about how you smell something different when you're out there on the practice field. I mean, I smell something different right now with the Nats. They got something cooking.
Yeah, they're turning it around. Pitching will win games for you as long as that holds the fort until the bats warm up. So now their bats are warming up, and maybe we see a duplication of 2 seasons ago. That'd be nice, right?
That would be. But thank you again, Lake Lewis, for joining this special interview. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you on the next one. Peace.
All right. Take care now.